What happens when the very people who claim to protect your neighborhood become the ones who destroy it? Imagine living in a community where you bought your dream house with your hard-earned money, only to be told you can't enjoy it unless you pay fees to a group you never signed up for. Imagine being threatened, harassed, and pushed to the edge because you refuse to bow down to an organization that thinks it owns your life. Now imagine watching everything you've worked for, your home, your memories, your safety, go up in flames. That's exactly what happened here. An HOA, Homeowners Association, decided that one homeowner was a problem simply because he refused to join their so-called exclusive club. They sent letters. They sent fines. They sent threats. But when those didn't work, they went further. Too far. They set fire to the very home he built, thinking they could intimidate him into silence. But what they didn't know was this: the man whose house they burned down wasn't just any ordinary resident. He wasn't someone who would be bullied into submission. He wasn't someone who would sit quietly while criminals walked free. He was a judge, a feared judge, a man known in courtrooms for tearing apart corruption, for handing out sentences that left wrongdoers shaking in their boots. And now, the HOA had declared war on the wrong person. The arrogance of the HOA was unbelievable. They thought they were untouchable because they had power over the neighborhood. They thought they could bully anyone into paying dues. They thought intimidation worked. But this time, their victim wasn't a retiree too scared to fight back, or a young couple struggling to make ends meet. This time, they picked the one man whose very profession was to enforce the law, and he wasn't going to let it slide. What followed was not just a legal battle, but a personal mission for justice. This wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't about fines or neighborhood rules. This was about principle. This was about corruption being exposed for what it was. And this was about showing a group of arrogant people that no one, not even a so-called homeowners association, was above the law. The fire that destroyed his home sparked something bigger than just anger. It sparked a courtroom war that would unravel everything the HOA had built. It pulled back the curtain on shady deals, backdoor agreements, and criminal acts hidden behind the words community guidelines. The very people who thought they could police others without accountability found themselves in front of the one man they should have feared the most, the judge whose home they burned. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about standing your ground, about refusing to be silenced, and about watching justice unfold in its most raw, powerful form. The HOA tried to destroy him. Instead, they destroyed themselves. The fire wasn't just an accident, it was deliberate. Investigators quickly determined that the blaze started in multiple locations around the property, meaning it was arson. And when arson is tied to harassment, threats, and extortion attempts from the HOA, the case takes a whole new direction. But at first, law enforcement didn't know who they were dealing with. They treated it like another property dispute, another neighborhood conflict blown out of proportion. But the moment the homeowner revealed his identity, that he was a sitting judge, everything changed. Suddenly, the weight of the case grew heavier. This wasn't just about one man losing his house. This was about a criminal act against someone who had the power to dismantle an entire corrupt system. The HOA had been pushing him for months. They'd sent notices claiming he was required to join, even though his property deed stated otherwise. They had fined him thousands of dollars for things like the color of his shutters, the length of his grass, and even the type of vehicle parked in his driveway, all while he wasn't even a member. Every letter was more aggressive than the last, filled with threats about liens and foreclosures. But he ignored them because legally he didn't owe them a dime. That's when the intimidation escalated. Neighbors whispered that he was being made an example of. Anonymous notes showed up in his mailbox saying things like, "Pay up or regret it." And then came the fire, the ultimate punishment for daring to resist. The HOA board thought they had silenced him. They thought burning down his home would send a message not just to him, but to everyone in the neighborhood: fall in line or lose everything. What they didn't realize was that this man had built his entire career fighting intimidation. He had stared down gang leaders, corrupt politicians, and white-collar criminals who thought they were too powerful to fall. Compared to that, a group of HOA bullies didn't stand a chance. The judge did what he knew best. He gathered evidence. Every letter, every fine, every voicemail, every witness who had overheard threats, he collected it all. When investigators hesitated, he pushed harder, reminding them that justice was not optional. And slowly the truth came out. The HOA wasn't just harassing him. They had been extorting multiple homeowners for years. Families were forced into paying thousands in bogus fees. Seniors were threatened with foreclosure if they didn't comply. Some even lost their homes because they couldn't keep up with the endless stream of made-up violations. It wasn't a homeowners association at all. It was a racket, a criminal enterprise hiding behind legal jargon and neighborhood rules. As the case built up, cracks began to form within the HOA board. One member, fearing prison time, confessed that the fire had been planned during a private board meeting. They had voted on it like it was just another line item on their agenda. They justified it by saying it would teach a lesson and maintain community standards. That confession sealed their fate. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Neighbors, reporters, and even other HOAs from across the state tuned in. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when an association drunk on power was finally forced to answer for its crimes. The irony was bitter. The people who once bragged about controlling their community were now the ones standing powerless before the very man they tried to destroy. The HOA's lawyers argued it was all a misunderstanding, that no one intended harm, that the fire was the act of a rogue individual. But the judge knew better, and so did the jury. The paper trail was undeniable. The threats were undeniable. The confession was undeniable. When the verdict came down, it wasn't just a legal victory, it was a public shaming. The HOA board members were convicted of arson, conspiracy, extortion, and fraud. Some faced decades behind bars. Others were hit with massive fines that bankrupted them. The so-called community leaders, who once strutted around giving orders, were now reduced to criminals in jumpsuits, begging for mercy. But the story didn't end there. The judge made sure it didn't. He used his platform to expose the dangers of unchecked HOAs, shining a spotlight on the corruption that often hides in plain sight. His case became a turning point, sparking new legislation in multiple states to protect homeowners from predatory associations. The neighborhood itself changed too. Without the corrupt board, the community finally breathed freely. Families who once lived in fear of fines and harassment could plant gardens, park their cars, and paint their houses without threats. The shadow of intimidation lifted, and people began to realize how much power they had blindly handed over to a group that never deserved it. And as for the judge, he rebuilt his home, stronger than before. But more importantly, he rebuilt his mission. What the HOA tried to take from him, he turned into fuel. They wanted to silence him, but instead, they amplified his voice. They wanted to control him, but instead, they gave him the stage to dismantle them completely. In the end, the message was clear. No one is above the law. Not gangs, not politicians, and certainly not a group of neighborhood bullies hiding behind the title of homeowners association. The fire that was meant to destroy him became the very spark that destroyed them.